author wanting to do a book about your case, what was your thought?
Well, basically, I thought, is this going to be another hump in the roller coaster? My family and I have traveled that roller coaster for a number of years, and basically that was my thought. We were probably going to go over another hump and then plunge off the end and end up down at the bottom again.
But you had to give him consent to, I mean, your journal, a lot of the legal papers allowing your attorneys to speak with him.
Yep.
What good did you think, even if it wouldn't result in your release, what good did you think the story would do?
Well, the bottom line is that, you know, my case in and by itself is not unique. There are hundreds of people across the country who fall into the same status as I did, being in prison wrongly, okay? I thought, if nothing else, the possibility of a book might have reaching effects to those people as well as for me.
And I guess we've heard about work that other justice projects have done, and if you walk through a prison, of course, everyone is innocent. Barry, how unique is it to have, as he said, you know, someone who says they're innocent to actually being innocent? How unique truly is that in the justice system?
How unique that they turn out to be innocent? Well, we know for a fact, because of the use of DNA evidence in recent years, the last dozen years, there's been, my last check, 300 exonerations due to DNA evidence since they started using it. That tells you something. And there's been studies then about, since you know those cases got it wrong because the DNA proves it, then you look back at do an anatomy of those cases, and you see why they got it wrong, and you'll see all kinds of things: forensic evidence, experts wrong, eyewitness, a lot of it having to do with eyewitness mistakes. You can start to see that the justice system is not fallible. Now, that said, you have to keep in mind that DNA evidence is not present in most cases. So if we're saying that we saw 300 exonerations in these DNA cases, that has to represent the tip of an iceberg, because you can't in most cases know. And in Bill Macumber's case, one of the things that made it such a huge challenge, an uphill climb for everyone, of course, the Justice Project, was that there was no DNA evidence in this case. So you don't have the means to establish clearly guilt and innocence the way that it happens in those exonerations.
Yeah, this case was a 1962 murder. Tim McCullough, Joyce Sternberg, 20-year-olds who had been house hunting, ready to get married, start a new life together, ended up in the desert north of Scottsdale in the Lover's Lane area, and somebody brutally shot them. 12 years later, in a case that had stumped everybody, focus turns to Bill, which was surprising. If you even reading the clips in the Republic back in the day, his neighbors said, this isn't that kind of guy. And we see that a lot on TV. People say, well, he was a nice, quiet neighbor. It just didn't seem to fit the profile of who this man was. Did you have to have, how much did you have to be convinced of his innocence in order to prove this, pursue this book, and were there humps that you had to get over?
Well, sure. First of all, to do anatomy and a report of this case means, first of all, you have about, there must be about 8,000 pieces of paper spread out around my home. If I could get a picture of my home study in these piles. I haven't taken them down yet. I'm not sure I ever will. They're just going to populate. I spent a lot of time reading through the record. And it's complicated. I've done more than one story or chronicle about a case. And so one thing you know is that most of these cases contain a lot of contradictory evidence. What goes on in the courtroom is not a pristine search for truth. It's a competition between two competing narratives. Advocates